Have the roll call. Oh, thanks. We please have roll call.
Councilmember Wilkinson. Present. Mayor Cooper.
Present.
Councilmember Mark.
Here.
Councilmember Carapiet. Here.
Is there any public comment on any of the closed session items? Not here. Any on Zoom?
There's no one online.
Okay, then we will adjourn into closed session and return at 6:30. I do like that thing. It's fun. Get your aggression out. Whack. Close, oops, sorry, thanks. We're back from closed session. And our attorney, Mr. Shen, will be announcing actions taken in the closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. I just want to, for the purpose of the record, want to mention, first of all, that council members Peter Mark and Sally Wilkinson are recused from item 5B on tonight's agenda due to their proximity of their residences to the property in question. I also do want to report that the remainder of the council did unanimously vote to deny the claim submitted, the tort claim submitted with respect to that same property at 22 Eucalyptus. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, before we start with the business of our meeting, I would just like to ask for a moment of silence to honor our former mayor, Constance Wiley, who passed away sadly on December 24th. She was known by everyone in the community as Connie. She served on the Planning Commission for 4 years prior to serving 2 terms on the City Council. She was mayor twice from 1999 to 2000 and again from 2003 to 2004. She was definitely a beloved resident, leader, and role model in our community. So if we could just take a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you. And now I'd like to move to City Council reports. If anyone has anything to report on the council.
I do. I attended my first RBRA meeting last Thursday, and it was quite informative. They did a lot of background history to get, there were 2 new members, myself and Jack, I think it's Wickham from Mill Valley. And they gave us a lot of background information. They are down to 21 vessels on the bay. 5 are under enforcement. 5 vessels are in the designated anchorage area, and they have 16 vessels that are in the eelgrass area. And so this year they continue to work with finding housing for boats that are not seaworthy. So that's my report.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just have a couple of items to report. The first one is in relation to the discussions that Belvedere has entered into with Tiburon Fire Protection District to look for an alternative fire model. As we discussed at a prior meeting, we, with the help of LAFCO, put out an RFP, and earlier this week, 2 representatives from the fire district, 2 representatives from LAFCO, and myself and Robert interviewed 3 different firms to help us with that work. 1 was selected, and this now goes to LAFCO's board to approve that, and we'll then be able to provide more details in future meetings. The second item is in relation to the Tiburon traffic study, and there's just 2 components to announce there. As you all know, this is a study which is trying to find solutions to improve traffic flow on Tiburon Boulevard, Paradise Drive and Trestle Glen. We've already been promoting an online survey, and that survey remains in the field until the end of this month. And that's really to gather information from residents of Tiburon and Belvedere as to their travel patterns and ideas for improving traffic on Tiburon Boulevard. You can find the details of that survey on the homepage of the town of Tiburon. And I believe we'll be promoting in our newsletter again this month. And in addition, in relation to the work that Parametrics is doing, they are holding a workshop this Wednesday, January 15th, from noon until 1 p.m, just to update the community and take input in terms of what they have learned so far. Again, the details of that workshop can be found on Tiburon's website, and also I think it's on our website as well, correct? Thanks, Beth.
Thank you. Okay. I wanted to also say that at the top of our minds are the horrific and devastating fires in Los Angeles. And I'm sure everyone's heart goes out to anyone that was affected by that tragedy. It's definitely bringing the focus of emergency preparedness to our community. And I did want to remind everyone that last summer, the council did adopt the hazard mitigation plan. And then in early fall, we adopted the emergency operation plan. And these two documents will be the basis for our new Be Ready Belvedere initiative. And in conjunction with the Belvedere Tiburon Joint Disaster Advisory Council, we are in the process of setting up a working group to begin focusing on Belvedere's specific needs that are highlighted in those two documents. The other thing I wanted to say is that in thinking of reading and watching everything going on, all of us on the council want to especially thank our Belvedere block captains. It's at times like this that we recognize the important role they play in our community and how much we value them and their commitment to our safety. And finally, we need everyone to sign up for Alert Marin, which is the primary notification system for emergencies in Marin County. And I think it's just alertmarin.org, maybe .com. Anyway, we will be putting that out in the newsletter with the link attached. So that'll be there on this week's January newsletter. That's all I had. So Mr. Zadnik, the city manager report. Oh, is there any public comment on city council reports or questions? And any on Zoom?
Yes, we have Mr. Rothman.
Okay, Mr. Rothman, you have 3 minutes for our comment, or please go ahead.
Mr. Rothman, you should be able to unmute yourself. We can come back to him later.
Mr. Rothman, are you available to comment at this time? You need to unmute yourself, otherwise we'll come back to you later.
Hello?
Okay. Oh, there
Hello?
you are. Okay, we hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Do you know the picture disappeared from my screen? Do you know whether the picture is going out? Because originally it was on the left-hand side of the screen, it said you're looking at the clerk's screen, and on the right-hand side of the screen was the picture of the city council. But then when the meeting began, my screen went blank. Do you know whether it's going out?
I don't know that we have any way of knowing that. On our screens here, we're seeing what you describe. And therefore, we do see the picture, the video of the city council.
Oh, okay. Well, it must be a problem that I'm having then.
Okay, did you have another comment or?
No,
were you
no,
just-
I just wanted to make you,
Okay, thank you
Thank you.
very much. Okay, we'll check it. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that.
Okay, bye.
There are no other hands raised.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Mr. Zadnik.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cooper and council. A few updates. Last month, the developer for Mallard Point submitted applications to the city for demolition and infrastructure improvements. Those applications are available on the city's website for the public to view. Before any staff or consultant level review of those documents can begin, we are requiring an updated cost recovery agreement and initial deposit from the developer. Once that's complete, we'll conduct our own initial review, circulating the plans among the planning, building, and engineering departments in-house. We'll then forward the plans to outside firms from who the city has set up contracts for geotechnical, hydrological, and overall plan review checks. These firms will be providing a peer review of the submitted items and will also conduct their own technical analyses. From that, staff will develop a list of what's missing from the applications and provide initial comments back to the developer. But again, first, we need a full deposit and cost recovery agreement in place, and that's currently underway. We've been updating the Mallard page website, so please take a look if you'd like to review the submittals, and feel free to contact Director Mark Wick if you have any questions. Turning to Public Works, this week we are issuing an RFP for design, engineering, and permitting services for repairs to the sections of the Beach Road seawall. Council identified this repair project as a priority last year at our annual retreat, and the multi-year funding has also been set aside for engineering and construction. Since that meeting, there's been a large effort to refine the design and the alignment, as well as some cost analysis work to make certain the scope of work doesn't exceed our budget. We're now in the RFP process where we'll be identifying qualified and interested firms who can fully design the improvements, secure the regulatory permits, and push the project out for construction. This is a project that's beyond what our small engineering department can realistically oversee. So the RFP will also include a section for construction management or project management services. The RFP will only be open for a month starting this week, which is typical. We'll hold interviews in February and plan to return to council for contract approval, most likely in March. So thank you, Tony, and to you and your team for getting this project queued up and getting us to this point. Moving on, this evening, Jason will be giving his quarterly update for the police department. He's asked me to mention very quickly a brief update on e-bike safety. For those who are not aware, a special council-led committee on youth e-bike safety was established this summer, and that group met twice in the fall. One of the outcomes of that meeting was a commitment from the county council to develop a draft model ordinance that agencies can choose to adopt. The ordinance would be in response to Assemblymember Connolly's AB 1778 bill that restricts anyone 16 and under from operating Class 2 e-bikes. It's up to individual agencies to decide whether or not to adopt ordinances that are responsive to that bill. So it's good that the county is taking the lead on the model ordinance. We'll keep the the council and the public updated as this work develops. And then finally, a quick reminder of our annual town meeting. It's going to be on Thursday, January 30th at 6 p.m. at the community center, and the annual retreat, which will be on Thursday, February 13th, starting at 9 a.m. in the morning. Well, this retreat will also be in the community center to accommodate any members of the public who may want to join remotely. That's all I have for now. I'm happy to take questions.
Anyone have any questions for our city manager? I had one. I know that I think it was early December, maybe mid-December, there was some on Beach Road, there was a project that Public Works was in charge of to replace a retaining wall. Has that been completed?
Yeah, from talking with Tony earlier this week, that project is very close to completion. The wall is installed and the cleanup has been done on the site. I think the last bit of work is just repaving. Yeah, repaving the gap where they exposed the retaining wall and replaced it. So almost there.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you. That's a relief. Is there any public comment on the city manager report? Seeing none here. Any in Zoom?
Mayor Cooper, there are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Police Chief Wu, we'd like to hear your report.
We can get that queue up here real quick. Okay, fantastic. Just button right. Good evening, Mayor Cooper and council members. Tonight, I am pleased to present the police department's fourth quarter report for 2024. Our residents can always expect an unparalleled police service that epitomizes the highest level of community caretaking. Starting off with our RIPA stop data, this quarter, 9 individuals were contacted for various vehicle code violations. 1 was detained for suspicious criminal activity, and 1 was contacted for welfare check. Of these 11 detentions, 7 were officer initiated, while 4 were based on calls for service. In all, 9 warnings were issued, 1 arrest was made, and 1 was held for mental observation. The perceived racial compositions consisted of 8 Caucasians, 2 Hispanics, and 1 Black. During this quarter, the department handled 1,246 incidents, which included 3 Part 1 offenses and 1 Part 2 offense. The remaining 1,242 incidents are classified as all other incidents. In other statistical snapshots, the department conducted 9 traffic stops, made 1 arrest with 1 prosecutorial referral, and received multiple citizen appreciations. And also during this quarter, 61 coyote-related incidents were also reported. We also updated 17 and implemented 1 new lexible policies in accordance with amended laws and best practices. And these updates are detailed in the staff report. And as part of our ongoing professional development, PD personnel attended online and in-person training that were either mandated or for knowledge and skill enhancements. And PD continues to be active in community events, which we always take great pride in in being a part of. And this concludes my report, and I am available to answer any questions.
Anyone on the council have a question? I just wanted to be clear. So as this is your quarterly report, this would be October, November, December 2024.
That's correct.
And anything that happened after December 24th will go into the next.
That's correct.
Okay, so I think that needs clarification. I'd also like to just mention, as far as the coyote incidences, is that during this quarter, 99% of them were sightings. So sometimes incident sounds like it's a lot worse than that. And then speaking of coyotes, I wondered if, when possible, if an officer can try to be present at the San Rafael Avenue Windward Road morning school bus pickup. Apparently, there was a report this week at the time that children were there waiting for the bus, that there was a coyote standing nearby, not interacting at all, not interested in any individuals, but there, and the parent had requests. So I thought I'd pass that on if it's at all possible. Thank you. Okay, anyone in the public wish to comment on Chief Wu's report? Is there anyone on Zoom?
Mayor Cooper, there are no hands raised. May I, apologies, is your mic on?
Oh, no. Sorry.
That's okay.
Don't make me say all that over again. I'll use my school teacher voice and yell out there. Okay. And now we have a presentation by our former volunteer of the year, Adam Gavser, regarding the 2025 Belvedere Homemade Film Festival.
Good evening, Mayor Cooper and City Council members. Thank you for giving me this time. I am following on the overwhelming success of the inaugural Belvedere Homemade Film Festival in 2024. I decided to try to do it all again. So I'm here asking for your support. Primarily just getting behind the project, giving me some of the funding, and I think overall it was a great success. We got a lot of people involved. I had young people at the schools involved. I had elders doing their piece. We had a fun evening in the park, probably about 250 attendees. And I'm looking to expand that next year, get more people involved, more community members, more school groups, and more people to the event. Here with me, I have Paige Peterson, who's my executive producer of the event. And I wanted to introduce you to Matteo, who actually I'll leave it to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Matteo Farinacci. I am a newer Belvedere resident as my family's moving up from Redwood City at the moment. And I had an amazing time working with Adam and Paige on this past festival and getting the youth involved and really engaging with this new community. It was a super fun experience. And now that we've done one, I think that we can improve a lot and continue something amazing. I'm a filmmaker and producer, and this has really sparked the Marin-based filmmaking community. And I've gotten a lot of inquiries from kids in schools and kids from the surrounding areas that want to get more involved in film. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Matteo. Just to, as a reminder, we're also working closely with the library. We're going to be hosting some workshops there, free workshops for people to come learn about filmmaking. Matteo is very involved in that as well. And the library really likes it as a way to bring more people into the library, teaching them about facilities that they have available to people. So I ask for your support in this project, and thank you very much for your time. Any questions?
Any questions?
I had one. So in your report, you said that after doing it for a year, that you felt you needed to have more marketing and advertising, and that was one of the reasons for the uptick. So could you just say a little bit of what kind of marketing, advertising changes
Yeah,
you're thinking about?
I'm gonna do more. I found the banners to be quite effective, so I'm gonna do one for my first phase to get filmmakers involved, and then have it up a little bit longer to get people to the event. I'm gonna probably up the investment over at the ARC and do some more social media advertising, and then basically posters, postcards, probably do a mailing, things like that.
Okay, great. And Matteo, welcome to Belvedere.
Thank you.
It's nice to hear youthful enthusiasm about participating in the community. Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, is there anyone in the public that has any comment on this presentation? Anyone on Zoom?
Mayor Cooper, I see none.
Okay, well then, thank you. Thank you, team. And your item is in the consent calendar. Speaking of which, we are at the consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of,
Mayor
oh,
Cooper,
sorry.
while we're still on this subject, so as not to pull it off consent, can I just make a request relating to this item?
Yes.
8C,
8C.
just, is that still okay? I know we had the open, but just my only comment would be that in the staff report for contributions like this, it'd be great to see the budget item where we are for contributions like this. I'd hate to have it be a first come, first serve type scenario where we have X amount put aside for community events, and we don't want some coming in late in the year and use it up. So it'd be great to see what it is, and maybe a little list of historically what has been given, so we have a sense of where we stand on our budget.
Yeah, that's great feedback, and we can incorporate that on the next round of funding requests. It's, I guess, importantly, this project is going to be happening obviously in October of this year, which would be in our next funding cycle. If council approves it on consent, then obviously we plug in funding in the budget, but also consider overall trend wise how much money we're spending on these events going forward.
That's okay. Okay, so consent calendar consists of items that the city council considers to be routine or council has discussed previously and do not require further discussion. Unless any item is specifically removed by any member of city council, the consent calendar will be adopted by one motion. Council will take public comment on all items on the consent calendar when the calendar is called, and it has been called. So does anyone on the council care to remove any of the items? Anyone in the public care to remove an item? Anyone on Zoom?
I see none.
Okay, then can I have a motion to approve consent items A through E?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next on the agenda is our first public hearing. And this is an introduction reading of an ordinance of the City of Belvedere amending Belvedere Municipal Code Chapters 19.79 accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. I think our planning director has this report.
Yes, I do. Good evening, Mayor Cooper and council members. The housing element, as you know, is part of the city's general plan and identifies policies and programs to meet the housing needs of the city's current and future residents. City staff, consultants, and city officials have been working on revisions to the housing element as required by HCD. Most recently, the city submitted a second revised housing element to HCD on November 15th, 2024, with hopes of receiving approval or most likely comment letter from HCD tomorrow, which is exciting. In connection with the ongoing housing element process, at its December 17th, 2024 meeting, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on the proposed zoning ordinance amendments and adopted a resolution recommending that the council adopt the proposed amendments. The zoning amendments further the city's proposed housing element in that they incentivize greater development of accessory dwelling units at affordable rental rates. The zoning ordinance amendment makes changes to Belvedere Municipal Code 19.79 regarding accessory dwelling units. On January 16th, 2024, the council previously adopted amendments that made changes to this chapter. One of the intended amendments would have allowed more square footage for ADUs if the homeowner deed restricts the ADU to low-income rentals. This intended amendment was not included in that January 2024 ordinance, and the proposed amendment before you tonight remedies this oversight by adding the required provisions. Staff recommends that you approve the first reading of this zoning ordinance amendment, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the ADU ordinance revision? Peter?
Of course I do. No, I've already mentioned this, Rebecca, but for full disclosure, I'll mention it again. The first sentence where you talk about a property owner entering into a regulatory agreement with the city, that's new language for me. I'm not aware of that. I've seen in other cities' codes a declaration of restriction and not a regulatory agreement. So I just like some clarity along those lines. I think I know the answer, but you don't need to get specific. I wonder if it needs to be that, or it could be a regulatory agreement or a declaration of restriction. I mean, something that gives the city some latitude there, because this isn't new law. This isn't a new process. And I'd hate to be coming up with something that is new when every city and town in California has recorded affordable housing to HED satisfaction. So it seems strange that we're coming up with something new, spending the time and energy to do so when it's been done for quite a while.
Good evening, council members. I will confess to a little bit of plagiarism here. I did borrow that phrase from San Francisco's approach to this issue, regulatory agreement. I'm getting a head shake no, but I do promise I did borrow the phrase from San Francisco, but I have no objection if you want to add your additional or language.
Well, San Francisco also has a office of the mayor that regulates certain types of affordable housing. So that may have a different process than a deed restriction. So I don't know if San Francisco's the best one to follow.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Mayor's Office of Housing Community
Yeah, yeah.
Development. This language was taken from the planning department's
Oh, okay.
information.
Yeah, I don't think Councilman Carapet and I have a concern about this broadly. I'd just like to give us the most latitude in this ordinance so that when the second reading comes in, we don't need to worry about it. But I would think a simple call to HCD and ask them, how can we accurately and most effectively record these low-income properties so that it's lawful and enforceable.
Yeah, to be clear, the agreements would be recorded, but certainly if you want to add or declaration of restrictions, happy to add that as well.
I think that might give us more options in the future as well.
And I think also I had discussions prior with Ann Danforth, our planning attorney, city deputy attorney. And she said there's multiple ways of doing this. It's just the way I've seen it is through a deed restriction. So I think that the city would probably want to keep it as simple as possible, less complicated.
Right, and certainly all flexibility is always great to have. More options, the better.
And also, Rebecca, just to clarify, we, HCD had commented that we had some ADU, some items they wanted us to add into our ADU provisions, which they've not gotten back to us, and we're still working on those. So this isn't all encompassing of potential ADU changes in our ordinances.
That is correct. I'm hoping to bring an all-encompassing update to the March Planning Commission hearing.
Okay, is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question or comment on this report? Anyone on Zoom?
Mayor Cooper, there are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. As a first reading, we don't take a vote, do we?
Yes, Mayor, we do
Oh,
vote on
okay.
the matter on
Okay.
first read.
So I move to approve the first reading of the ordinance.
Is there a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that motion carries. That ordinance carried. Next, we have an appeal of construction time limit penalties imposed for the construction project located at 30 Cliff Road. Mr. Von Son, this is yours.
Yes, it is. Good evening, Mayor Cooper, fellow council members. Before you tonight is a CTL penalty appeal for the recent project at 30 Cliff Road. The project was 201 days past the CTL deadline and was assessed a penalty of $187,200. This project consisted of 2 building permits. The first issued on March 16th, 2022 was to demolish the existing single-family dwelling and construct a new dwelling and an ADU. And the second permit was to install a solar PV system and an energy storage system. Per the valuation provided on the initial building permit application, the project was assessed an 18-month CTL timeline. Prior to the issuance of the initial building permit, a 6-month CTL extension was applied for and obtained by the applicant. This provided a CTL timeline of 24 months and established a CTL deadline of March 16th, 2024. The project was not finalized by the CTL expiration date, nor the grace period deadline, and was subsequently fined in accordance with the governing municipal code. The property owners appealed the penalty based on numerous items as outlined in attachment 7 of the staff report. Staff contends that the provided reasoning for appeal only partially met the necessary factors needed to grant relief from the penalty. Staff recommends that council reduce the penalty by $54,000, totaling 45 days, and assess a new penalty total of $133,200. Staff is open for questions.
Okay, thank you. But before we begin with questions, I wanted to note that we received letters in support of waiving the CTL penalty on this property. Letters were signed by Lee Tan, Steve Silberstein, Clark Winslow, Janet Brown, and Bill Rothman. Does anyone have any questions for our Director of Building?
Hi, Brian.
Hello.
Two questions for you is, one, throughout this process, the construction process, did the project lead reach out to the city and notify us to any of these delays?
We,
So
not
the delays that have
directly
been-
for the delays. We were in contact with the property owner and the contractor throughout the project, but it wasn't specifically regarding these delays. The only one we did have some conversation about was PG&E.
PG&E.
Yes, correct.
So 6 of the 7 were things that the city was never directly notified, as there might be an issue with the timeline based on these factors.
Yes, sir.
In real time. Thank you. The other question is, based on your experience, is this being handled consistently with how all other CTL appeals have been handled? Just in terms of, I want to be sure that we're being equitable and how we're looking at the different criteria, how we're addressing the, concerns or rationale that the project lead has put forward. Are we being consistent?
I feel we are. The major question at hand is the relief or partial relief for the PG&E connection, which is not a standard reason for relief that we provide. However, in this project, the connection of the utilities had a direct impact on the finalization of the permit. And it was beyond the control of the applicant or the property owner. So we felt that the 20 days that the project sat around and waited for connection towards the end had a direct impact on the finalization of the permit and therefore the CTL penalties.
And so the other 40 days, you decided we wouldn't need to act on those because their construction continued during those 40
Correct.
days?
Yes, sir.
And maybe the last one was just about the hazardous material abatement. If you could just talk a little bit more about that in terms of what is known by, is it a J permit or J number that's pulled?
A demolition permit, they call it a J number, from the Bay Area Air Quality Control District or Management District, excuse me. And that is required for large demolition projects, whole houses, things like that. And the Air District requires that the demolition, the debris from the demolition be handled not only on site, but taken to a facility that is compliant with California regulations for hazardous material abatement. So you may not know exactly what the hazardous material is or where it's at, but in getting that number, there's kind of an anticipation that you'll run into something of that effect.
In the statement or the rationale for the delay, that it was much more extensive or very unusual, is not something the city found or agreed with?
It is not one of the allowable findings that can be made as per the code. And therefore we would not have provided them relief for that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have some questions. So Brian, on the fire department, is it a requirement by the fire department or is it a volunteer applicant's wish to allow the fire department to use their home as a practice area?
It is completely voluntary, and they allowed the fire department to come in. On this project, there was 2 separate crews that were allowed to come in and do training for the benefit of obviously their own department as well as the community around, but it is completely voluntary to allow them to do so.
And does the applicant know at the time of pulling the permit that time the fire department is using the property, that it adds to their CTL time or takes away from their, is added to the construction time limit? Is there a disclosure that 10 days or 2 weeks, whatever it is part of their CTL or
It's
will
not
be?
specifically stated. However, it is stated that all activities, once the building permit is issued, is covered under the CTL. It does not, the clock does not stop once it starts ticking. So that includes all activities per the code that this project was issued under.
Okay, and then I just wanted to follow up a little bit on Councilmember Burke's comment about PG&E. I do understand that PG&E lags in response. But it also seems like they put an application in and then didn't check on it for 9 months. And that was like way before their construction time limit was up. So what was the real lag from PG&E that at the last 20 days? Is it that they just didn't get in line soon enough? I mean, have we seen this kind of delay in other projects?
We have seen delays in other projects. We have not seen this type of delay. I would defer to the appellant as to the reasoning why they feel
Okay.
it affected them. But we did have a time frame at the very end of the project where we could not finalize the project due to utility hookups. And we feel that that lag time had a direct result or an impact on their fines. And therefore, that's why it's not the total requested time, but only a partial.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question is in July, I believe, of 2024, 3 months or so after they were supposed to be done with their project, they got a permit for solar and I think batteries. Was that just they didn't include that in their original permit, or did they forget about it and then realize they had to do solar? Or
it was always part of the project. And again, as I understand the progression of the project, actually some of the work got done prior to the issuance of the permit, and it did kind of get forgotten about. However, per our policy, we require 2 separate permits. We do not include the solar work as part of the single family dwelling construction. So we had always known, and the applicants had always known, the property owners had always known that solar will be installed and needs to be installed on part of this project. The late timeframe of pulling the permit, we do not believe had an impact on the finalization date.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Brian, I just have one follow-up question on the Tiburon Fire Protection District question, which is, this was a voluntary decision by the homeowner to allow this. And I'm just looking at our municipal code under the appeal factors. Which one of those does it fall under? Because I don't see which one it would qualify for.
I believe that would be, staff felt it would be the neighborhood considerations,
I don't,
allowing the
I don't
fire
see that in
department
the
to come
list.
in.
Can you point me to where in the municipal code that is listed?
Give me one quick second here.
Because when I'm looking at construction,
Yes, you are correct, council member.
we don't have any grounds.
Trying to read and do everything. Sorry. So while not completely specifically stated in section 4, we did feel that that was a benefit for the community, allowing the local fire department to practice and train on the home, benefiting the entire area. And therefore, because it was voluntary, we felt the need to allow them to have that 14 days for the fire department credit. But it is not explicitly stated in the code. You are correct.
Okay, obviously that's a discussion item because we always try to be consistent with
Understood.
the code
Totally understood.
and fair to this, to all appeals.
Understood. This one is, again, we don't always have this fire training as part of the project. A lot of people do not allow the fire department to come in, which is maybe why we haven't seen it so much in the appeals. But again, allowing the local fire district to come in and train, practice venting structures, pulling incapacitated individuals out of structures, we felt that was a benefit to the community and deserve some relief. But it is not explicitly stated in the code.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Brian, just a couple quick things. The CTL penalty appeal meeting that you described on December 5th, just remind me, is the point of that meeting to come up with recommendations for this appeal, or do you have discretion in that group meeting to alter the amount in and of itself, or is it only a recommendation to this council?
The point of the meeting is to have the appellant state their case for why they believe they deserve the appeal. We take all the information and then have a discussion on what we feel complies with code, what they did throughout the course of the project to comply with everything, get the project done. Did they have issues based on their actions and their decisions that caused the project to go long? Was it other things such as fire training? And it wasn't a long time period, but it was a time period where construction couldn't occur due to that. And so we have that discussion at that point, and we try to use the empirical evidence that we have in front of us to make a decision and provide a time frame or a number of days that the project may have been delayed due to the reasoning, the code compliant reasoning.
I guess that's my question. Are you making a decision or are you making a recommendation?
We are making a recommendation to city council at this time.
Thank you. And to follow up on council members Burke's comment about the credit, the 10-day credit for the deconstruction, it's not really related to hazardous materials, right? I mean, they have their own process. That's the requirements for that disposal is pretty well mandated based on what they find. And yes, that can be unanticipated as far as the scope of it, but most houses in Belvedere you'd have to assume a fair amount. The part that confused me was you qualify for this if they employed dismantling techniques as approved by the project waste management plan. And in my experience, what that means is basically you come up with a environmentally sensitive, a renewable approach to deconstruction versus demolition. You know, you pull it apart, you know, more economically or non-economically, more discriminative, in a more discriminating fashion. You donate stuff, you reuse appliances, things along those lines. Did they do that to some degree in order to get that credit, or is that just?
They did dismantle portions of the home. They did not just drive an bulldozer and excavator through it and then pile everything up and put it in a dumpster. So they did dismantle some portions. We did not have the specific plan that you were referring to. It was not reviewed. It was not submitted. It was not approved. But we did feel that throughout the course of the project being involved with it, we do know that they deconstructed some elements of the project, and per that table and the valuation of the project, we provided what was allowable by that table in the code.
It's a very confusing table, I have to say. Yeah, I understand you giving them the benefit of the doubt there. It just, I think our code has some quirks there.
There's a lot of quirks. That the code in which this project is under has quirks.
Yeah, and I had the similar questions about the public utilities as far as work going on. And I do see it not finding a place, but I have had similar experiences with other projects that there are many projects around that sit around vacant with no work going on while they're waiting for that hookup. Not to say that it's necessarily in our code as a reason to alter the fine, but those are my questions. Thank you.
I had a couple of questions. I just wanted to clarify that at the outset, they were given the 18 months, and then apparently there was a recognition that this would go over the 18 months, and so they immediately requested the 6-month extension. And in that committee meeting, the issues that were noted to request that extension and then to actually get it were scope of work, site topography, and site access issues. Do you recall if there were any other factors discussed in granting that extension?
No, ma'am, not off the top of my head. I do
Okay.
not. The first two that came into my head were site access and site topography. Those two would both be qualifying factors to receive an extension.
Mhm.
But I do not recall exactly what they were at that
Sure.
time. It was a long time ago.
And then there was something about soils classification and a geotechnical report. And that being, I think that came up later on as soils being an issue. Can you explain what a soils classification is? Is it different levels of?
Yeah,
I'm
soil
assuming you're
classification.
classifying the type
Yeah.
of soil.
So for engineering purposes and construction purposes, you have to know the type of soil that you are building on and its compressive strength, PSI, things like that. And so your soil classification goes from clay, sandy soil all the way to bedrock. And bedrock being the most sturdy you have, sandy clay soil being the least sturdy you have. And the more engineering and structural elements have to be installed in terms of construction. So the classification would just be whatever soil is out there, loamy, sandy, clay, bedrock. There's numerous ones, but that would be the actual classification. It's just so the structural engineer understands what needs to be built to be safe.
And the soils classification would occur prior to the building
Yes,
permit?
we would receive that with the geotechnical report, which would be basically at application of the permit.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all I have right now. Thank you. Okay. Then I would like to, if there are no other questions by the council, I'd like to open the public hearing and ask that the appellant's team present. Are they on Zoom?
Yes, they are on
Okay.
Zoom.
Hi, this is Ben Jacoby. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. I thought, and I'm not sure how interactive this can be under your procedures, but there were a number of questions that the council members raised that I'd like to address initially. I think the first one was from Councilmember Burke, and it was something about, did we let staff know about delays? I guess all I can say about that is we were in constant contact with the city staff. Both, Brian and his team, they were terrific, by the way. So if there was something there that, excuse me, that leads you to think that we just kind of went about and did our project in a vacuum and then lo and behold, there were delays. That's not the case at all. I mean, this was a very interactive process. So that was the first one. The second one, I believe, was on PG&E. So the PG&E delay was that we submitted our application and then we literally could not get a response out of PG&E for 9 months. I think I said that in my letter. And what we understand happened is that the PG&E consultant that was used on the project was an outside consultant who was terminated and no one told us. So we literally lost 9 months from PG&E on that. And the only reason that we were finally able to engage with PG&E is through personal connections. We made some contacts and that finally got things moving. I think the next question or discussion topic was with respect to the fire department training. So when we applied for our permit, there's a somewhat separate process with the fire department, and they asked us if they could train on our property, and we obliged. And that, frankly, is how we've always approached this project. Before we started our project, we let 46 Cliff, which is across the street, which is still under construction. we let 46 Cliff use our driveway. We have quite a long driveway for about a year for parking to keep cars off the street. So it's hard for me to sit here as one of your constituents to think that, you know, somehow there's a technical reason that under the code, if we provide a community benefit to use our parcel for fire department training, that somehow we should be dinged from that. But, you know, I hope that's not a lesson learned, you know, for us going forward. But that's a little bit of the sense I was getting. The other question, just moving along with respect to hazardous materials. So it's correct, there's a J permit that's pulled with the California Department of Toxic Substances. And pursuant to that, we had to do various testing after the deconstruction of the home, of the old home started. And when we started the project, we knew that there was asbestos tape around some of the ducting, which is quite common for projects of that vintage. The home was built in 1965. But what we found, unbeknownst to us and outside of our control, was that there was asbestos in the sheetrock. And so all of the sheetrock had to be meticulously removed and disposed of as required by the California Department of Toxic Substances. So, so that's why we asked for a full 60-day relief with respect to deconstruction of the existing home. And to answer the other council member's question, you know, is it kind of the hazardous waste component of deconstruction that gives rise to the allowance here? Or is it if you deconstruct the home using kind of renewable methods? Well, we did both. I mean, we meticulously deconstructed the home. We recycled wire. We donated windows. We did everything that was possible to deconstruct the home in accordance with the code. The last item that I think was a topic of discussion amongst the council members was the soil classification. So in our letter, our appeal letter, I think it's items 3 and 4 dealing with soil conditions. So we did, of course, have a geotechnical report complete before the project started. That formed the basis of our 2-year plan to complete construction. But there's only so much that a geotechnical report can tell you and that you can plan for when you're building in conditions such as exist on Cliff Road. So while we knew the soil classification going into the project, and that soil classification formed the basis of the structural engineer's design requirements, you can only know what you're dealing with at a site like that once you get on site and you start drilling piers and you start off-hauling soil. And that's why we asked for 25 days for pier drilling because of the delays that were outside of our control as enumerated in item 3. And we asked for another 25 days as enumerated under item 4. With that, I'm not sure if we're able to pause if you wanted to ask any further questions or if I should keep going.
Mr. Jacoby, you have 3 minutes left, 3 minutes
Okay.
and change, and then we'll ask questions at the end of that time.
Okay, very good. I guess one other element that I think should be strongly considered is the time frame that it took us to complete our home relative to other projects on Belvedere Island. And staff sent me data for construction time periods for 1 Belvedere, 270 Beach, 1 Blanding Lane, 130 Bella Vista, in addition to our own. And the average time frame that those homes took to complete was 4 years. Our home at 30 Cliff was 2.7 years, and therefore amongst homes with completed construction on the island, we essentially represent the gold standard. And so it's in that context that that we think that items that are outside of our control should be judged. The other element is I guess I'd say a strong nudging by the city. We included an ADU in our design. We didn't have to do that, but we did do that. That was at considerable cost to us and also a considerable length to our construction time period. I did not include that in my letter. Mr. Rothman was so kind to point that out in his letter. Just flipping back to the letter that I sent. One other element that I'd like to talk about is item 6, was the unforeseen COVID labor stoppages. I know staff denied that request, but people get sick. And even though from a statewide and national perspective, the COVID pandemic is deemed to be finished, that doesn't mean that people getting sick from COVID or other factors are within our control. And there's no way for us to plan, for those types of events. So with that and with the full support, again, I add from our neighbors, all of our neighbors, mind you, we're here today respectfully asking for a full waiver of all construction time limit penalties. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The way the process works now is the city council members will ask you questions if they have any. So please stay on Zoom. Does anyone have a question for Mr. Jacoby?
Yeah, I have one question. This is Kevin Burke. Thank you for that overview in response to our earlier questions and comments. So the 280 days that you're proposing, I'm just trying to figure out the math in my head. So for 0.8 of a year, you're saying the project stood idle?
No. Do you have a copy of my letter dated November 21st? I mean,
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, sir. Yes.
So if you look at the last page, there's a grid which adds up all of the requested penalty
To
relief.
280, yeah,
Yes.
correct. So, but what I'm asking is, so are you suggesting that for 280 days out of the 900 and some odd days that construction happened, the project stood idle? So no work was done on those days?
No, but if you have a delay for soil conditions, that individual work stands idle, but other work can happen. But then you have to go back and resume the schedule that you had, for example, for site work. So
Right.
that's the way construction works in my experience. This is the only time I've ever built a home. I work on large infrastructure projects for my work. And so I've seen, in the field, very large construction projects
Yeah,
experience delays. And that doesn't mean the whole project gets shut down.
right.
Delay gets extended because you have individual instances where segments of the total work are delayed.
But I think, and maybe, what I'm reading in this is that this proposes or suggests that it is linear and that you're asking for relief as if the project did stop for those days, that you couldn't be working on other things. I mean, again, I was just curious. It seems like
I'm
a
not
big
sure
block of time.
Sure, I'm not sure I understand that. Again, if your civil work stops for 50 days, yes, you can do other work, but you still have to go back and do your civil work, right?
Correct.
So it's not like somehow that schedule can compress.
Right. I
So
understand.
there are individual timelines within a Gantt chart, if you've seen one of those before.
True. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, is there anyone else with a question?
I had one quick question for you, Mr. Jacoby, Pat Carapiat here. So who was in charge of the project? Did you have a project manager? Was it the contractor? Did the architect see the project from start to finish? Who was the person who was responsible for the project on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So day to day, of course, the general contractor, Gordon Olson of Olson Brothers Construction, was responsible. We were fortunate enough, and really one of the ways that again, here we are sitting here subject to a massive penalty, yet we represent the gold standard in terms of actually completing a project within this time frame. But the only reason that we were able to do that was we had Gordon and his team on an uninterrupted basis, as well as our architect firm, Regan Bice Associates, who still represent us.
Thank you.
Can I follow up with one question, actually?
Sure.
On, again, the question of the fire district training. Mr. Jacoby, are you suggesting here that you were ready to do demolition and that you paused for the 15 days that the fire district did training?
Yes, they asked us, and I would never tell the fire department no for something like that. In the same way that I wouldn't tell Mark Swanson, who's the contractor across the street at 46 Cliff, that he couldn't use my driveway to park his trucks for a year.
No, I understand, and it was generous of you to do that. It was just the question, the day after they finished, you began demolition. Is that correct?
That's correct, from what I remember, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jacoby, we all appreciate very much your generosity in having the fire district use your home prior to demolition. And I think we're just trying to understand, did you work out an agreement with them ahead of time, how many days they would be there? Or was it open-ended? Could they have been there a month without you saying anything? Or did they set up ahead of time how many days they'd be using it?
I believe it was just by email. I don't think there was a formal agreement.
So you didn't really know how long they'd be there? You didn't have an exact, say, decision between both groups that they would be there for whatever it was, 2 weeks or 15 days?
I don't
Okay.
know specifically. I just went back and I looked at how much time it actually took.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let's see. I know you said that PG&E, you had lost 9 months with PG&E, but
Correct.
how did you do work without PG&E for 9 months?
So we're only asking for a 60-day relief from PG&E, and I don't think I'm able to switch my screen that quick enough
Oh, okay.
to see what staff has recommended we be allowed. I guess the reason that I mentioned that 9 months and I emphasize our experience there is, number one, no one really has any control over what they do. They're not subject to your jurisdiction, and absent the connections that we made, with higher ups in the organization, we have very limited pull as citizens and ratepayers with them. But the 9 months is typically the process that they say it takes to go from date of completed application to approval. And in our case, unfortunately, they used an outside contractor, and they just went dark on us. And by the time we realized it, we had lost 9 months of that process. But the relief we're asking for in the case of PG&E is 60 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hang on there a second.
Yeah, I have one more follow-up question to Mayor Cooper. So, and I didn't quite catch it. So who hired the third outside party for PG&E? Was it PG&E or was it you?
PG&E.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we didn't even know, right? So it is often the case with these things, right? The way you make things happen is trying to make personal connections with the hardworking staff at large organizations. It's actually getting things done, and that's the only way that we ultimately found out that the reason for the initial delay was that they had used an outside contractor as a project manager who then they supposedly terminated, and that's why we got lost in the shuffle.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other comments by council members, I'll open this up to public comment.
Yeah, I would just, before we do that, I would just again draw your attention to the number of days for projects on the island, because I really do believe, you have a municipal code and you have an allowance in that code for items that are outside of the party's control. And that's hard data, right? So I really do think that we did everything humanly possible. And I think that the data proves out that we did that. I mean, we completed our home a year earlier than the next quickest project. And I think that's very important. And I think it's completely within the allowance of the code to provide relief in the context of that type of hard data.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other comments or questions, then I'll open this up for public comment. If there's anyone on Zoom.
Mayor Cooper, we have no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions for staff? No? Okay, then Mr. Jacoby, you actually have another 5 minutes if you'd like to take that time.
Sure, thank you for that. Maybe just to recap. So again, I draw your attention to what is it? Page, I can't see what page that is. The last page of my letter. So we've talked about fire department training, the home deconstruction. Again, with California Department of Toxic Substances, I mean, they take as much time as they take, and none of us have jurisdiction over them. And to me, that is something which is legitimately outside of my control and frankly, the city's control. And that's allowed under the code as an item to be provided relief for, in my opinion. And the reason for that 60 days is because it wasn't just the asbestos tape on the ducting work in the house. It was the asbestos that was in the sheetrock, which I guess is something that happens from time to time with sheetrock that was produced, back in the 60s. I talked about, the planning that we did through the geotech report on the soil conditions. But again, that only gets you so far, and you could plan all you want, but you really only know what you're dealing with once you get on site. And the actual conditions and the drill schedule that we had, we did the best we could. And the reason that we were delayed was, again, outside of our control. On the COVID delays, I take staff's point that as a statewide matter, limitations on penalty enforcement due to COVID were lifted. But, again, people get sick. I believe that staff got sick at some point, during during our process, and so that they couldn't come to site for inspections. So like it or not, COVID was a real impact for us. The extreme weather that we documented fully, we believe in our letter, again, staff didn't see their way to giving us any relief for that, although they did acknowledge that the past couple years were significantly higher rain totals than what was experienced in years prior. And again, we think that the code allows for relief in that case, because that was outside of our control. Two other things, the design changes. So we did have this issue on the permit for the solar and battery, but we had already planned for that. That didn't cause us any delays. That's really just kind of an administrative thing, that there was a separate permit. But I think the point here is one of the reasons we were able to build this home quicker than anybody else has been able to build a home on the island is we built the home that we designed. If you look at the renderings of the project that we produced as part of the design review, and I would invite you up to the home. It's a beautiful home. Come up, bring those renderings. We built exactly what we planned to build. And that's why we were able to build the home within this time frame. And that goes to why the code was set up as it was, because residents had a habit of proposing a home and then completely changing the design. Well, we didn't do that at all. And lastly, and in closing, on the ADU, I know the city is under extreme pressure to increase housing stock, and I didn't include it in my letter, but Mr. Rothman was kind enough to point it out. We included at the nudging of the city an ADU, and that was at considerable expense and time. And had we not done that, we probably would have been able to finish our home, 6 months earlier. I don't have exact data on that, but it was a significant cost and time consideration for us to include that ADU in our design plans. Thank you very much. We appreciate all of your hard work and your consideration on this.
Okay, thank you. I will now close the public meeting, and the city council will deliberate on this item. Before we start, I just wanted to remind everyone that these CTL appeals we acknowledge that they're very stressful for homeowners, difficult for our staff, and for all of us on the city council. But as Councilmember Wilkinson mentioned, we take these appeals very seriously, and we're bound by our codes, by the concern for the whole community, not just immediate neighbors, and by the consistency of the process. We're happy to have you as neighbors in Belvedere. This is a hard way to start off. I know you brought up other buildings, other homes being built, and there are construction time limits for many different projects, but not all of them wind up in an appeal. So we do have to balance everything carefully. With that, would anyone like to begin their comments on this?
Can I actually
appeal?
do you mind if I just start with a follow-up question for
Oh, sure.
Brian as well? I'm a little bit out of order here, but obviously Mr. Jacoby has mentioned that his property should be considered the gold standard and everything else runs over by years. And I wanted to just check in about that, because all of the homes that were listed there, 270 Beach, 1 Belvedere, they began during COVID, correct? And so they qualified for some relief because of state requirements. And that explains some of that. And there are many properties in Belvedere, including my own, that would have been fully torn down and brand new houses built. And managed to achieve their build close to the requirements in terms of construction time limits. Is that fair?
I think that would be fair. I had not done an assessment on recent projects and their time frame and things like that. Again, many times in Belvedere, there are projects in areas and it's just difficult to build them. Whether that be as, the no fault of anyone's, but it's just the size of the project and the area of the project with some of the codes that municipal codes that we place down on construction, it makes it very difficult to construct some of these homes within the time frame allotted.
Right. Thank you.
Can I have a follow-up, quick question as well? I didn't see the paperwork. Rebecca, do you remember what the square footage of the house was? Was there a size variance or exception? And did the ADU count above and beyond the allowable square footage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure Ben knows the total square footage of his house.
And do you have that
Ben,
number
are you
offhand?
I can look it up if he.
It's 5,200 square feet.
Does that include the ADU?
It does, includes the ADU and it includes the double height core and the garage.
Okay.
Didn't ask for it.
And just to, I don't want to be out of order, but the comps I was referencing are in the similar construction area, R15. And yeah, I understand that some of those homes were built during COVID, but some of them were started before COVID and are still being constructed.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. That's great.
Okay, any other questions?
Just and this is a question for you, Andrew. Just in terms of the code. So based on the code, there's those 6 areas that we can reduce or remove a penalty, but only those 6. So it's 4A through F.
Yeah, if I may, and to expand on, I think a point that Councilmember Wilkinson already made, the key factor is whether it's beyond the control of the applicant. And then A through F, as I interpret it, are illustrative examples of what would be matters that are beyond the control of the applicant.
Okay, so it's not only those 6.
Yeah, but the overall principle is what is within the applicant's
Correct.
control.
Okay,
But
thank you.
it doesn't say that though. I don't mean to disagree with that, but it doesn't say among others, or it doesn't say any of the legal language you would normally see that would include others in that list. It says one or more of these factors.
It says, at least the version I'm reading says, for reasons beyond the control of the applicant, which may include one or more of the following factors.
Okay, so which may opens it up. So this is a partial list and it could be others.
That's how I interpret it. Yes,
I understand.
Councilmember.
Thank you.
Okay, would anyone like to begin commenting on how they feel about this item?
I'm happy to begin. As we say, when these appeals come to us, they are very difficult, as the mayor has mentioned, because they involve relatively large sums of money. And we work really hard and always have to be fair in how we apply the code to any of these appeals that come before us. So I absolutely appreciate that this was a very well-run site, that the neighbors were very pleased with Mr. Jacoby's desire to run an efficient site and have as little impact on them as possible. So those are all, important neighborly considerations. But in terms of the specifics that we're considering here that are relevant to our code, I would certainly accept that the delay for PG&E is valid. As far as I know, this is the first time that we've granted PG&E delays as a genuine cause of delay. And you're saying, Brian, that that caused 20 days of delay to actual activity. And so I think that's valid. And so I would certainly accept that. The same with the deconstruction of materials and the amount of time that's recommended there. The one I'm struggling with a little bit is the Tiburon Fire Protection District one, because I don't unfortunately buy the argument that the homeowner gave a blanket, you can use this site, and then was able to start demolition the next day. I have the sense that the property was available for them to do their training because demolition wasn't yet ready, would be my interpretation. But I'm happy to be flexible on that, depending on other council members' views on that, because I absolutely understand that that is a benefit to the community. It isn't strictly defined as one of the reasons, but I can see why. I can read that both ways. So that would be my take. I don't find compelling any of the other arguments that have been put forward by Mr. Jacoby, but I do certainly accept 2 and possibly all 3 of the recommendations from staff.
Thank you.
I go if you want.
Councilmember Mark.
Thank you. I agree with what Councilmember Wilkinson has presented. I certainly do understand and agree and empathize not only with the appellant's description, but our own city staff description of the diligence and the professional approach to the building process, and that there were no changes of substance that would set up sort of a serial permit type situation that we've seen quite a bit. So I do respect that, and that does go a long way, I think, in focusing the job to what it has been. Taking a step back, the purpose and theory of our CTL ordinance is certainly to protect the neighborhood in particular, but the community as a whole, its infrastructure, and that can't be sort of necessarily forgotten. It also is a means and a method to protect the city from a inspection services perspective, public works perspective, all the staff time and all the processing and requirements of managing and working with a homeowner on a project like this. And as a project is extended beyond that amount of time, permits no longer cover that cost. So it's not a way to make revenue, it's a way to, in a sense, recover costs that a larger project over this type of time period would result in. And having had, and I think we have a few commissioners who would probably relate to this as well with their planning experience, I don't think there's a large project in my planning experience that's we weren't upfront with the applicant that you're going to have a hard time building this. You're going to have a hard time doing this in the 18 months and the 6-month extension, and you need to plan for that. And are there considerations that you might consider that would get it done in the amount of time that you're saying upfront is going to get done in, and that the time limit is. And every time they say, nope, we'll get it done in time and so forth. So little less sympathetic to that. As far as your comment about the gold standard, again, with the same planning experience, I can recite dozens of projects that have been completed in the their appropriate timetable. It is a very challenging site location, and I'm very sympathetic to all the considerations that staff has identified as reductions in the total count. While I have a hard time finding the fire department specifically out of your control, I do, as Councilmember Wilkinson pointed out as well, see the community benefit and see the benefit of that. PG&E, while frustrating, I think it is the first time we've done that as well, but can understand, and I think Brian did a good job of describing the overall process and the house sitting awaiting their inspections while that hookup happened. So I can relate to that. So open to other people's comments, but I can support the staff's findings and recommendations to reduce the fine as they said. I would even have some additional considerations for the inclusion of an ADU should other council members see an interest in doing so. Thank you.
Can you just
So
say a little
you-
bit more
sorry,
about?
Excuse me one second. You also agree with the hazardous material removal?
The deconstruction, not so much with the hazardous material aspect of it, but,
meant the
yeah,
yeah.
but the necessity of the deconstruction process, waste management plan, approved waste management plan notwithstanding, they would have had to go through significant, deliberate and straightforward and in a sustainable and renewable fashion. So I think it does qualify for our reductions, as Brian had pointed out.
Okay.
And
yeah.
this issue with the ADU, it sounds like it was an inclusion above and beyond the 4850, and the ADU probably was allowable because of that. So it is a larger project. They're getting the space out of it, so that's a benefit to accrues to the homeowner. But it is a benefit to the city, and there's a modest and perhaps I don't think it's a big number, but maybe a week or so as far as in the broader scheme of it, because it is something that we do encourage homeowners to do.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Councilmember Burke.
Sure. Yeah, I was just wanted clarification on the ADU, but I'll go next. And I agree with what the other council members have said so far, although I think I'm going to be a little bit more lenient in how I'm interpreting some of these things, just based on, again, what the code will allow us to do. And, after hearing the appellant's rationale. So on the fire department training, I would support the 15 days. That is consistent, I think, with what staff is suggesting. I also would support the PG&E allowance for 20 days, not the 60 days, which was proposed. However, I also would, in terms of the home deconstruction, I would be open to increasing that allowance to 30 days. And the rationale for that is, I don't think we know. I mean, 10 days seems arbitrary. 60 days seems arbitrary as well. And, I think 30 days seems like a reasonable middle ground on that particular issue. In terms of extreme soil conditions and site logistics, I agree with the other council members that should have been a known thing, and they had done the geotech studies in advance. And so that should have been something that was already built into the plan. And the only other thing that I would be open to as well is the COVID delays. I know it was at the tail end of COVID, but I also know that's real, having done a project here on the island myself. And I would, like I did with home deconstruction, be open to up to 50% of what is proposed, so 20 days there. So by my math, I would be willing to go as far as 85 days. That's with no consideration about the ADU.
Okay.
Point of
Councilman,
clarification real quick. I
Sorry.
apologize. I don't mean to interrupt.
Sure.
The 10 days from dismantling comes directly from a code table for the size of the existing structure. So the previous structure was under 4,000 square feet. Per the table in the code, you were allowed 10 days to dismantle that structure. So that is how we came about with that number.
So that was my question is the 10 days you're granting is 10 days in addition to what was approved during the design review process. Is that correct? So instead of 10 days, they'd be getting 20 days.
No, for the dismantling, we are recommending the maximum amount
The credit.
allowed by the table in the code, which would be the 10 days per the previously existing structure for that size.
So don't they, during the design review process, get so many days? No. Okay.
It's a particular code in the appeal process that gives you credit for a sustainable dismantling approach based on the size of the house that's being dismantled.
Okay.
So it's only in the appeal that we'd address here.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. So I agree with my fellow commissioners that state this is the worst thing that anyone in the city wants to do, especially as a fellow community member, is, to impose fines, and it's very difficult for us to do. And we take it very seriously. And with that being said, I feel that I agree with no, not one thing, but the point Mr. Jacoby made on the fire department. When the design review came to planning, fire department does their review. And when there's a demo, they always say, this would be a great project up for us to do. I did not know that it was voluntary. And I feel almost like if someone is going to volunteer, that either the city decides that and confirmed with the fire department how many days they actually use and automatically give someone that kind of credit in their CTL, and or they have the fire department do it before they actually pull the permit to start the work. Some kind of process that doesn't penalize someone who thinks they're, and not only thinks, but is doing something for the community. So I would agree with the full 15 days on the fire. I agree with the dismantling for the hazardous material. Men in spacesuits show up pretty readily these days. And I can make for the 20 days for PG&E because I feel that was a third party that was totally out of their control. As far as giving additional credit for the ADU, I feel like the ADU wasn't the cause of the delay. The construction of the ADU wasn't cause of the delay, because I think if that was the cause of delay, it would have been in the applicant's appeal on why he shouldn't be fined. I think it was just something that Mr. Rothman pointed out, that he shouldn't be punished, but I don't think that was part of the delay because it wasn't thought of by the applicant until after Mr. Rothman's letter. So I feel it's something that is opportunist, isn't a opportunity for the Mr. Jacoby to add that in. And so I would be able to make the agree with the recommendation by the city. I would struggle with further reductions, but I'm open to listening to further conversation if it goes that way.
Okay, thank you. Well, I sort of came to similar days, but I got there in a different way. I actually had a hard time with the fire department. Was hoping there was some agreement on the number of days between the fire department and the owner. However, it seems that it was very loose, and therefore I am having a hard time believing that the fire district use was actually keeping the structure from the beginning to be demolished or be rebuilt or whatever. So I definitely would support the 20-day PG&E, the 10-day deconstruction, which is in our appeal table. And I was willing to give 15 days for extreme weather. When I looked back at the weather in March of 2023, not November, so just for the March dates, there was actually close to 12 inches of rain in those couple of weeks in March. So that does seem above and beyond normal rainfall. And so mine would be the 15 days weather, PG&E 20, the deconstruction for 10. And I guess I have a question, actually, Rebecca. because I'm not familiar with planning square footage. So what is allowed, what would normally be allowed at that, I think the square footage of the house was 5,200. What's the normal for on the island? Or
It
allowed?
depends on the size of the lot.
Oh.
If it's either 33% for FAR, or if the lot is 14,700 square feet or greater, they're allowed 4850 in terms of FAR. So I can pull up the plans here. I just had them up. It looks like they did ask for an exception to total floor area. So they did ask for over. And it was approved.
And then was the ADU beyond the exception?
The 800 square feet for the ADU is not included in your total floor area or lot coverage calculation.
Right.
It's a sort of a given. So the ADU. Let's see.
I mean, the finished product is
Yeah.
5,200.
Sorry, just to
So there-
chime in, it's 4,400 square feet without the ADU. That includes the garage and that includes the double height core.
Oh,
So
okay.
their lot is not 14,700. They're allowed 33% FAR.
Okay,
And they asked for over that.
okay. And then also have the ADU. So I
Correct.
would not support extra days for the ADU in that case. Thank you.
Brian, can I ask another clarifying question? In my memory, we have never given relief for an ADU. I mean, I'm thinking about prior CTL appeals that came. Many of them had, some of the bigger ones had ADUs, correct? And that was never an argument that was put forward. And I also don't believe we've ever given COVID relief beyond what was required by the law in any other CTL appeals. And maybe, I don't know whether Peter might remember too.
In response to the COVID, we did provide other relief based on an emergency ordinance of, I believe, 66 or 68 days in the early stages of COVID. That was prior to the state getting involved. So we did have our own little ordinance, emergency ordinance, or urgency ordinance, excuse me, that allowed, I believe it was 66 or 68 days for projects that met a specific criteria that were basically ongoing when COVID hit. And in regards to the ADU, off the top of my head, no, that is not, has never been an argument in regards or the context of a CTL appeal.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we don't have any consensus here.
We probably have the most consensus for what's recommended by staff. is the
Yes, we
45
have the
days.
most consensus there, if you're willing to.
I'm okay with that.
Okay,
Can I ask a quick legal question? Do we have to state the components of the number of days that it's reduced by? Do we have to state the reasons? Because we seem to vary on the reasons.
The council should try as much as possible to land on reasons that at least 3 members support.
okay.
So 3 members have to
Definitely
agree
have-
with staff.
We have
Yeah.
3 members.
I agree with staff recommendations.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I can support that too.
So, okay, then at this point, can we have a motion?
I can make a motion to to not approve the appeal, but adjust the amount by the 45 days, $54,000 as described by the city staff in the report.
Second.
That's sufficient? That motion, okay? Because we're not granting the appeal, are we?
That's correct.
So is the motion correct?
Yes, the motion is sufficient.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries to give a reduction of $54,000 worth of 45 days.
I apologize. I just want to clarify the vote, the final vote here. I heard,
Four.
okay, Councilmember Mark moved, second from Councilmember Wilkinson. And how many votes were in favor?
I think all five.
Was it all five?
I mean, I support the basic recommendation, but as everyone knows, I recommended going further. And so I agree with this, but I believe we should have gone further.
Okay, so 5 votes in favor. All right,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Sure. Okay, next on the agenda, I just have to find it. I have too many pieces of paper here. We're here to, our next item is to discuss updates to the facility use contracts between the city and the ranch and consider appointing 2 council liaison to aid the staff with the new agreements. I think our city manager is giving this report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cooper. The item before you this evening concerns the lease and funding agreements the city has written with the Belvedere Tiburon Joint Recreation Committee, commonly referred to as the Ranch. These agreements have not been updated for many years, and as the ranch programs and needs have evolved, many of the contract provisions are out of date and are no longer enforced. Also, some of the agreements outlining how they use the city facilities have expired. In years past, the ranch often operated in a deficit, requiring annual contributions from the city or subsidized use of Belvedere's facilities. However, as shown in the report, the ranch is currently operating with a surplus and has successfully developed a robust reserve over the past few years. So the timing is good to take a closer look at agreements and arrive at something that is fair, beneficial, and sustainable for all parties. This undertaking is a complex project. Staff is recommending that up to 2 council liaisons be assigned as part of a joint effort with Tiburon and the ranch to review and update the various arrangements. With council's approval, we would plan to bring back the new agreements by mid-2025 of this year for your consideration again. Yeah, that's all I have right now. I'm available for questions.
Okay, I think before I open this up for questions, I wanted to clarify something. I wanted to clarify that what we're actually being asked tonight is only whether or not to assign the 2 council members to work on the new contracts. I don't think we're being asked to, or this is my question, are we being asked at this time to actually get into all the details that have been proposed or explained to us here? Are you asking us for direction on how these 2 liaisons should go back? Or is it really more that we're just doing the liaisons and then the group will come back and give us recommendations? And at that time, we would have a full discussion on it.
Yeah, I think it's the latter. This staff report was essentially a research project, just initial assessment of where
Like
we are with the
background.
ranch, the
Yeah.
background, and with the understanding that we need to update the agreements. And again, like you stated, the recommendation is to have 2 council assignees work with staff.
Okay.
Can I provide a little context for some of this? Because I serve as Belvedere's representative, or the city council representative to the ranch. There's 2 other representatives from Belvedere as well. And the genesis of this is really initiated by the ranch's director, Jessica, who for the entire time I've been serving on the ranch board has been stressing that all of the contracts that they have are out of date or never existed, both for Tiburon and Belvedere, and has sort of been begging that the city and the town and the ranch sit down and try and put together hopefully evergreen contracts, or at least for a sustained period going forwards. And so this report has been sitting and drafted for quite some time. And Greg Chanis, the town manager for Tiburon, had asked that we not set up the committee until after the election in case council members in Tiburon had changed. And he was one that asked for 2 council members to be selected. He was recommending that there should be 2 from Tiburon, and so that we should have 2 from Belvedere as well, which is why this is coming before the city council, just to appoint those 2 representatives. I think Jessica is intending to probably have only 1 representative from the ranch. And a lot of this work, to be fair, will be done by staff. I don't anticipate there'll be that much that will be done by necessarily by committee members, but there was consensus that a committee should be formed, because it's not just the lease arrangements, it's the financing and funding arrangements as well, because these have been in place for 12 plus years, and it's probably time to assess whether all parties are being treated fairly. Is that a correct summary?
Well said.
Okay, then do we have any other council members that want to make any kind of comment right now, or give any direction or ask any questions?
I probably do, but I want you just have a public comment before we probably deliberate and have a.
Okay. Well, I thought you were asking a question. Okay, so you get to ask questions first, then I ask the public. You already forgot, it's been a month. So is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this item? On Zoom?
Mayor Mark, there are no hands raised. Mayor Cooper, there are no hands raised. Sorry.
Everybody's a wreck tonight. Okay, thank you. Now, would you like to have a comment, Council Member Mark?
Yeah, no, I think the ranch, the Record of Service is a wonderful resource for both our communities, and they're doing well financially. And I think we just need to balance and look at how it's paid for and the most equitable way to do so. And I think this is a great time to dig into a little bit. Sally, who would you like to have working with you on it? You clearly, I think, are the best representative to be one of them council members. Who would you like to work with on?
So Kevin and I have been working a little bit in advance on some of this, or at least he's been giving me a few ideas. So I think that would be a good fit for this. And it's a very discreet project. I mean, I'm really hoping that we can, with cooperation from Tiburon and the ranch and staff, get this done within, hopefully by the summer. But I do think it might be valuable, if you're interested, for us to come back with an interim report so that you guys can provide more input in terms of, rather than it being a fait accompli that both parties or all 3 parties have to agree to, maybe an interim discussion might be valuable.
I think that would be a great suggestion. I would appreciate it very much. Does anyone disagree with that? Okay, all right. Kevin, are you open to serving?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm a big user of the ranch, and yeah, which is why I sort of leaned into it a bit. So, yeah.
Are you telling us you go to the Easter party often?
I do. I've been the Easter bunny on several occasions. You just didn't recognize me.
Well, you're too thin to be the Easter bunny. Or maybe
it was his cottontail we saw.
Right.
Anyway, I'm glad to hear you're a great user of them. So anyway, then can I have is there any other comments or questions? Can I have a motion to allow 2 of our city council members, Councilmember Wilkinson and Burke, represent us on creating new contracts for our city and the ranch?
I make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you for
Thank
both
you.
doing that.
Yes, thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is consideration of a revocable license for private improvements in the public right-of-way along West Shore, 81 West Shore. Cove Road got in there by accident. It says Cove Road, Sammy, but it's West Shore.
Thank you, Mayor Cooper and council members. For your consideration this evening is an application for a revocable license to allow new and existing private improvements within the West Shore Road right-of-way. The applicant requests a revocable license to replace an existing driveway with new pavers and to maintain the existing planter box within the West Shore Road right-of-way. The shaded area in the exhibit represents the area where the pavers would be placed on city land. Here, the photograph shows the existing site conditions. The shaded area represents the portion of city land on which the pavers would be installed. One correction for council's consideration, the draft revocable license exhibit calls out only the driveway and landscaping as improvements within the right-of-way. However, the pavers would be installed over an existing walkway, which encroaches in the right-of-way as well. Staff recommends the exhibit be revised to call out these walkways should you approve the application. And staff recommends that the findings for the revocable license can be made. The driveway relieves potential parking congestion by allowing the owners access to their garage. And the new driveway would be a safety improvement from the existing concrete, which has degraded over time. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions? Councilmember Burke.
Thank you, Sammy. Just a quick question. So the pavers where you just showed the shaded area, so what's considered the sidewalk would not have the pavers?
Correct. The sidewalk would not be altered.
Great. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? No?
He answered my question.
Okay. Would I be correct in assuming that this driveway was done such a long time ago that no revocable license was there? And so this is essentially just by redoing it, it's triggering the need for the revocable license.
That's correct.
Okay. And does that small little planter area in the middle of the middle of this area, is that being removed or retained?
That would be maintained as an existing improvement.
Oh, okay. And okay, I know this isn't a question, but I did visit the property and the tree, the box where the tree is, has some kind of plants that are growing out over it. And I would hope that we could request of the owner that those get trimmed back because they are impacting the use of the sidewalk down there. So the box exists. If they could just keep the plants trimmed back to the box, there wouldn't be any problem. I know we're not dealing with that portion of their property, but anyway, that's just a request.
We are.
Oh, with the tree one as well? I thought we weren't dealing with the one with the box where the tree is.
Are you talking about the planter box?
No, the box that
Oh.
has the tree. It's still their property, but I think it was mentioned in the report that we weren't dealing with that. It was, that had its own revocable license.
Oh, across the.
Across the street.
Across the street.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so are there any other questions? Any comments from the public? Anyone on Zoom? No? Okay, in that case, can I have a motion to,
I can make a motion to approve
Approve
the
the-
revocable
yeah.
license as described for 81 West Shore Road.
Second.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. And our final item on the agenda is a discussion and possible action regarding the Planning Commission's composition and membership as set forth in Belvedere Municipal Code, Chapter 2.28. And who is presenting this evening on that?
I will be Mayor Cooper. Thank you. This item concerns, as you said, the size and the function of the Belvedere Planning Commission. Currently, the commission is a seven-member body whereby the city council appoints resident volunteers to a 4-year term. There are currently 2 vacancies on the commission, which provides an opportunity to review whether the commission should remain at 7 members or be reduced to 5. As outlined in the staff report, moving to a 5-member body could potentially increase efficiency by streamlining discussions, thereby improving clarity and direction to staff. There are quorum considerations with the smaller body. Because the 500-foot rule still applies, it's more likely that recusals could result in fewer than 3 commissioners able to vote on a project. The Brown Act does provide a remedy for these situations whereby the recused commissioners essentially draw straws randomly to arrive at a minimum majority. Any permanent change to reducing the size of the planning commission and/or add alternates would require staff to return to council with an update to the municipal code and APM policy. Tonight, staff is seeking council's direction on whether we should maintain the commission at 7 members or consider reducing it. Also, please be aware that there are currently 2 residents who've expressed interest in joining the planning commission. The city clerk let both of the applicants know the city council will be discussing this item tonight. So I look forward to your discussion or questions. That's all I have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, since we have 3 former planning commissioners here? I wonder if you have any questions, maybe just comments. I don't know. Any questions? Anybody?
We're in the question stage.
Yeah.
So when you say alternative, is that, maybe you give a description of what an alternative might be, just as for the public to know what we're talking about?
So one alternative, if the council did want to consider a smaller body but did have concerns over recusals, would be to appoint alternates. There's 2 other agencies in Marin that have done this, Tiburon, and staff report mentions City of San Rafael. With City of San Rafael actually has 7 commissioners and 2 alternates. I think one consideration is the level of experience that those alternates have. Again, it's up to the city council to interview and determine whether or not, if you want to pursue alternates, the qualifications and whether that's important. Really, I think that's, in terms of other options, I think that's probably the best one.
Go ahead, Tom. Yeah, I have a question. The legally required participation, so if in fact we do run into an issue with a quorum, does that in any way make the decisions of the planning commission more prone to being appealed or questioned? Because somebody could say, well, that person had a vested interest because they were a neighbor, even though they were chosen randomly.
Certainly rhetorically, I suppose that could lead someone to question the planning commission's ultimate decision. If we were in that unfortunate circumstance by saying this person has a conflict under this law. But I think that would be largely rhetorical. The legally required participation exception is set forth in FPPC regulations.
For this very reason.
Exactly.
Or for reasons like this. And do you want us to comment now or just save that till?
We have to save that.
Okay, sure.
Can I ask one quick question? The geographical distribution of the current planning commissioners, would that pose a lot of potential risks in terms of too many recusals?
No, this is the most geographically diverse planning commission that we've had for a while in terms of these 5 people.
Okay, thank you.
And just correct me if I'm wrong too, Councilmember Burke's point, a smaller body means you have a smaller quorum, right? 5 begets 3 versus 7 begot 4.
That's correct.
Got it. So you would have easier time making your quorum anyway. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, is there anyone in the audience who has a question? Anyone on Zoom?
Mayor Cooper, there are no hands raised.
Okay, so now we're back to our thoughts and comments on this item. Councilmember Burke, would you like to?
Sure. Having served for 2 years on the Planning Commission, I think it's a wonderful idea to reduce the size to 5. I think 7 can sometimes be, as staff has reported, memorialized in their report can be inefficient. There can be scheduling issues. And I think it also puts an undue burden on the community, the applicants. It's just more people that they have to coordinate with going through their homes. And I think it makes the meetings longer. And so I would very much support 5, although I do feel that we either need to choose having an alternate, so identify an alternate in the community who can step in if we end up in an issue where there's too many recusals and we can't get to quorum. Or I'm intrigued by this legally required participation. I think that might be okay as well, but I'm very much in favor of moving to 5.
Anyone else have any comments before a vote?
Comments. So I believe that going to 5 would be a good decision. I see pros and cons between 5 and 7. You know, going forward, city council will have to be very aware of where people live and not create too many triangles like Peter had. And with that said, we could be passing over a really great candidate because they live too close to someone. So that's kind of the con of, you know, going down to 5 is that you kind of have to watch the geographic location and not get too many people living close together. I feel that I personally liked that if there was a project around me that I was recused versus having to make a decision that would directly impact one of my neighbors, either beneficially or not. I would prefer to have the alternate concept. I think that we have some retirees that you know, would be able to serve if we ran into a quorum. I also think that we ran into this even with 7 people, that too many people going on vacation in 1 month. So I think that there should be consideration to that, people understanding that we can't have 3 people gone because that would cancel a meeting and that impacts the community. So, you know, with every decision, there's pros and cons, but I think I would like to see trying the 5. If we run into problems, I would assume be able to make corrections if we felt something came up we hadn't anticipated. I don't know if we're going to be changing code. If we can have flexibility in the code that we have a minimum of 5 to a maximum of 7. I don't know if that's possible. Leave that up to the legal brains. But I think it's a good step forward. And it will just mean that there's additional things we're going to have to look at when we receive applications to understand the full impact. But I think it's definitely worth a try and to go ahead with it. And so I would be in favor.
Okay, Councilmember Mark.
Hi, thank you. I've always been a little hesitant on this issue. Meaning I've not been in favor of thinking about 5 in the past for a couple of reasons, primarily given the small geographic area of our community, and recusals has been an issue. I take that the current planning commission is pretty well spread around. But that's always been a question and a concern, as well as the relative strength and weaknesses of council members, both creating enough diversity of experiences on that commission, but also for the extracurricular projects that are asked of them sometimes. And the depth has been, we've had good bench strength before. And if you get down to 5, you almost by definition lose that. I'm sort of intrigued by Robert's description of the alternate or alternates. And I guess I would look at it 2 ways. One, as Councilmember Carapia had talked about it, whether a past commissioner could step up as a alternate, both for mentoring purposes, but to fill in at I don't mean a moment's notice, but a month's notice. They would certainly be able to pick that up quickly. But there's also an opportunity to bring someone into the Planning Commission to learn as an alternate too, to not necessarily be thrown to the fire right away, and to learn the experience and see if it's right for them and right for the city. So I would even consider a couple alternates should they be available, because it gives you that opportunity to have a solid bench with a previous commissioner and someone who could come in and learn and experience it without necessarily having their vote count so immediately. You see the benefit of the small one, and I guess I can consider it, but I think I'd like to have the option of having an alternate. Or last year we were considering keeping it at 7, but only requiring 5 in attendance, arguably. That way the chair and the planning director could decide geographically, or who's in residence or who's around, who would come to it. So the commitment is basically not 12 meetings a year, but 10 meetings a year, arguably, and you rotate it through. So you still have 7 appointed, but you don't expect, or you don't ask everyone to come to every single meeting. It just gives you that depth as well. So that was another alternative to get to the practical purposes of 5 without changing our code or without changing our approach. You just have a different theory of working on the Planning Commission. Those are my thoughts, but open to what people are discussing.
Okay. Councilmember Wilkinson?
I think as the sole council member, well, actually not.
No,
One,
one of 2.
one of 2 have never served on planning. I would support the idea of reducing to 5. I mean, we serve on a 5-person city council, and I don't see that it should be significantly different for the planning commission. If that's a decision and we're going to update the municipal code, maybe there should be some language in there about geographical diversity as one of the requirements. And I also see the description in the APM seems to require planning commissioners to have a professional background in architectural design, which doesn't seem to necessarily be true. So I think if we're doing an update, we should update everything to be consistent. In terms of the alternate drawing straws, I am completely ambivalent and have no experience. So I'm curious if staff has any view on that, as well as the people who run this all the time.
I think having alternates would probably be a good idea, especially if we can get a commitment from some of the well-seasoned ex-planning commissioners. That would, I think, be a benefit to where we are right now with the planning commission. But drawing straws works too, it works. I've seen it.
Okay. Thank you. I guess it's the 2 non-planning commission people, but I concur with Councilmember Wilkinson that I feel we as a 5-member board work well. We don't run into too many issues. I'm pretty sure, or I guess I should have asked this question earlier. Is there an expectation of number of meetings that a planning commissioner can miss? Is that anything in the APM? Is there a?
I think they can only miss 2, but I don't know where I'm getting that information from besides my head.
I think that's a gentleman's agreement, because it's the same with
Okay.
city council. We're
Right.
always just told you can't miss more than
Okay.
2, but I don't think it's written down anywhere.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Right, so I think if, assuming they're working under the same ideas that we are, that again, that people are very aware and take their responsibility seriously if they're going to bother to be on this commission. And I would hope people don't take advantage of that and miss more. So, and again, I think worrying about living too close together, you probably could have, in order to answer Councilmember Carapiet, we probably could have two people within relatively close without too much worry. Having three obviously would be silly, and that became difficult even on the 7-member group. So it's definitely happened no matter what number is there. So I don't see that as an issue. I would also support the idea of one alternate if that alternate were an experienced planning commissioner who had been a former member, if people feel that that's important. Certainly, they could help with mentoring new commissioners as well, which wouldn't be such a bad idea. Okay, in that case, is there any other comment or question?
I'll ask the planning commissioners of this. Do we think an ex-planning commissioner would want to do this?
I think, well, I can't speak for people, but I think some of our recent retirees, namely Marcia Lasky and Nana, would be willing to do something like that. I think they kind of miss it a little bit. Maybe not the monthly commitment, but just, the process and the people. I think we need more than one alternative because we can't, I think it would be hard to restrict one commissioner from traveling. So I think we should always have a backup. And one commissioner might also, or alternate might also have to recuse themselves because they live too close. So I think having at least two alternates is a good idea versus just one.
Mayor Cooper? I apologize to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know, we do have a hand raised in the public.
Did I forget to ask?
No.
You did ask.
Oh,
It
okay,
was
good. I was
a
like,
late-
geez, I've been doing such a good job. Okay, if I do say so myself. Yes, who's coming on?
We have Stager Johnson.
Ah, great. I'm assuming it's, hello? Is
Hello.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, Steve
Hi.
Johnson, 89 Bayview. Good evening, and I apologize. I should have raised my hand a bit earlier, but it's been a while since I served on the Planning Commission, and so take that into consideration. But I can see the benefit of reducing the size of the Planning Commission to 5. But there are some, drawbacks as well, and I think Peter elucidated those fairly well. If you get too small a number of people deciding on a big project, that can be problematic. But really what I wanted to say was far more important than the size of the commission is the training that should be required for every single planning commissioner before they decide on any single project. And I don't know what the city provides now in the way of training for planning, but when I sat on planning, everybody who was chosen as a planning commissioner went through a process of training. And, many people in the community, unless in their daytime jobs, they've had, occasion to review plans and go over legal requirements, they may come to the commission with no idea how to read a plan. They may not know what a setback is or an FAR. What titles of the code can they rely on and look to? What should they be looking for? All of those things should be covered in a very comprehensive training before anybody sits and reviews a project on the Planning Commission. And I think to the extent that isn't done, we as a city are really remiss.
Thank you. I really appreciate your comments, and we're going to take those to heart. I think we all agree with all your statements. So thank you very much. Yeah, I am hoping that as we move forward and redo some of the APM edits, that we can also look at perhaps making a requirement of a training, or that we do a better job of offering training, and that we probably need to go back and look at the onboarding book at this point after several months ask the commissioners what would have helped to be in there and maybe review it again and look at it as a living document that we can, improve upon as we go forward. So I think, let me ask you, Robert, are we actually designing this tonight with the number of alternates, or are we merely asking you to come back, hopefully in February, with a first reading of municipal code and APM changes?
So I think what would be helpful for staff this evening is to point us in the direction you want us to pursue. If that's reducing the planning commission by a certain number and considering alternative language that includes alternates, then yeah, I think that would be
best.
That would be clear enough for us.
Okay. Well, I think we have at least majority who agree with moving this down to 5 from 7. I think that'll put us way more in line with most of the Marin County, other Marin County Planning Commissions. Certainly we're the smallest population, but most around us have 5. And then I think we have some discrepancy in numbers of alternates. Kevin or
Yeah, I mean,
Commissioner Burke?
I said I was open to either way, but I mean, alternates would be great. I mean, if we have community members that we think would be willing to step up and serve, I think that would be wonderful. Also, you mentioned as mentors, that could be incredibly helpful as well. I think 2 is better than 1. Just again, to give us more flexibility, to ensure we always have a quorum and so forth. So that would be my recommendation.
I think you could, thread the needle by in the composition section saying shall consist of 5 persons to be appointed by the city council with up to 2 alternates. Something simple as that. That way you have the flexibility to have 1 or 2 alternates based on applications and availability.
Yeah, and interest.
And interest, yes.
So does that mean people would have to apply for the alternate position as well? They would, okay.
I guess we could look into, that'd be an administrative policy on how we appoint those people. If it's an interview process or it's, simply staff working with the mayor or some other committee liaison to determine who's the best person that should be tapped. We can look into that and we'll come back with some options.
Why wouldn't that be the same as appointing a commissioner?
It certainly could be a council member, but if you want other options about possible appointment, we're happy to look into them.
I mean, I would vote for having it come back to the council. And because you want to manage the 7 as a whole, or the 5 plus whatever alternates you have in terms of composition, geography, experience, and so forth. And so I think that would be, they serve at the pleasure of the city council, I believe. So I think that's our responsibility.
Okay. I'd also add, though, that you don't want to give the impression to the regular planning commissioners that there's less burden on them because there's alternates. I think that would be important to certainly stress that these are meant to be used in exceptional circumstances rather than just when you feel like having a night off. I think that'd be important to stress. And I did want to make the point in terms of training of planning commissioners. The California League of Cities does a really good 2-day onboarding for planning commissioners, and I would pretty much make that a requirement going forwards if possible, because I think they're excellent trainings.
And I think it's very close. It's in Santa Rosa in March. So it'd be a great and easy way for our new commissioners who haven't had much experience to get up to speed. I guess I also want to say that I agree that the idea of the alternate literally is if there's a quorum issue. This is not like, well, this or that. It's beginning to sound in our discussion as if these alternates are just floating in and out all the time. And that is not the purpose of the alternate at all. The alternate may never be used in an entire year. I mean, if there's no quorum issues and there's no issue that way, that person may never be involved at all. And so I think it's really important that somehow that is made very, very clear. I don't see this, frankly, I'm not sure, that it would ever happen that we would ever use an alternate. So given that, sure, if we want one, if we want two to be there, fine. As I said, I think using them in a mentoring capacity could be helpful. But I absolutely support the idea that this is a complete 100% exception.
to the rule. I had a question about that though, is, so let's say if one of the five is unavailable for whatever reason or needs to be recused, they still have a quorum. So would you proceed with the four
Yes,
versus bringing the alternate? The only reason you bring in an alternate is if you don't have a quorum.
correct.
So we might want to specify that. I mean, so
Or if you have, with 5, you could easily have 2 absences. And
The quorum is still 3,
it's
which
still a
we
bit
have
3,
had
but,
before, and
but,
we've
but,
made decisions.
but one of Steger's points, a broader perspective is, more than 3 people reviewing a project will benefit the city. So as chair, I think with the planning director, they can decide, okay, we only have 3 people this meeting, should we bring in an alternate? Based on the scope of the projects and if they're looking at 2 irrevocable licenses, maybe not. But if they're looking at a project like, we saw tonight, the scale and scope of it, they might want to utilize that alternate, especially because that alternate would have had more experience. So I agree that it should not be utilized often, and the 5 sitting commissioners should be well aware that you're expected to come every time as much as you possibly can, and that certainly if a quorum is needed, but it just would be foolish not to take advantage of that alternate should you have that opportunity if there's 3 at a meeting. If there's 4 in a meeting, I wouldn't worry about it. I agree with you on that case. Because 3 would be unusual.
Mhm. Is that enough from us? Do you want us to keep talking?
I think that's enough.
Good. We don't have anything more to add.
Thank you.
Okay,
We have what we
then
need.
wait, so do we need are we just requesting then that language come in February about changes to the municipal code, or we,
Municipal code and APM as well.
Yeah, ordinance and the accompanying APM
an
amendments.
APM? Yeah,
Subject to further input from the council, of course.
correct.
And then is it just the mayor and the staff that are going to work to decide who they will approach to be recruited to that alternate position, or how will that work?
Well,
Is
I
it going to be
think-
advertised?
Shouldn't the alternate have like criteria that they, have architectural background, they've been on the planning commission, that, some strong background? Because, I mean, you can't have someone jump in that doesn't know the code on a temporary every once in a while, because the only way you learn the code is month by month, by month, by month, by month,
Right.
by year,
Yeah, and
by decade.
yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, the ordinance doesn't need to be elaborate. We don't need to elaborate too much on that, but the APM could be
Right.
added describing what the alternates, what the qualifications are in the process, as well as to Steger's comments, and Sally's as well, the training requirements. I think that could and should be put in the APM. At the first available opportunity for new council members, for new commission members.
So that's not going to be done by March, right? So how do we handle? I don't know if it was Sally that said it would be good that they go to this League of City
That's
Council
for the
in March.
New
New people go in March. I mean, how do we get them to go this year?
They're 4 times a year, those. It just happens that the one, I think, next is in Santa Rosa, is it, or somewhere close by?
Yeah, it's close. A lot of times it's out of down south there.
Yeah.
I think
Up north.
that sounds like a city manager task.
Okay, then as long as you have enough information to move forward, we'll move on to the open forum. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to briefly address the city council on any matter that does not appear on this agenda, but is within the city council's subject matter jurisdiction. Upon being recognized by the mayor, please limit your oral statement to no more than 3 minutes. Under the Brown Act, council members may not deliberate or take action on items not on tonight's agenda. Matters that appear to warrant a more lengthy presentation or council consideration may be placed on the agenda for further discussion at a later meeting. Is there anyone here who wishes to make a public comment? Is there anyone on Zoom?
Mayor Cooper, I see none.
Thank you. In that case, our meeting will be adjourned.
Thank you.